Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut on 101 ESPN.
Here's 5 youthful players on the ice for the Blues. Here's a shot. They shoot. They score! Carbonneau chucks it to the goal. That puck deflected. I don't know if it hit a Blue. It might have hit Alexandrov. And goes in, and the St. Louis Blues are on the board. It's 2-1. 3:02 to go, second period.
Well, that was the lone Blues goal tonight as another game in preseason action, and the Blues only picking up 1 goal. Welcome, everyone, into our extended post-game coverage. We call it the fourth period. It's always presented by First Community Credit Union, along with Urban Chestnut's Zwickle Light and Scott Lee Heating Company. We're along with Grant Francis, our producer, and I'm Alex Ferrario, as we're live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. If you want to jump into the conversation there, of course, on our flagship station, 101 ESPN. Stinks to lose. You'd like to see a win in preseason, but I think Jim Montgomery narrated it best yesterday, and Joey and Curbs narrated best last night on their breakdown. It looked like one of the first preseason games. It looked like the second preseason game of the year, and it also looked like the first game for a lot of guys that played. With the exception of Justin Carbonneau, that was the first game anybody has played in terms of actual hockey. So, yes, it looked choppy. Yes, there was another game of lack of offense. I take absolutely nothing from it, because when you're watching these games, they're not so much watching how much offense you're creating in the zone. They're watching individual players. They're watching how guys play away from the puck, decisions that they make with the puck on their stick, and what do they do with it. There were times that I thought the Blues looked like they were buzzing, and there were times that I thought the Blues looked like they were chasing. And that, to me, screams preseason. Typically how these go, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, I would imagine you're going to see some roster cuts by Monday, and then you'll get the camp shortened a little bit to one group, and then that one group will play a couple more preseason games, and then they'll cut it down once again because they don't play again until Saturday. So this was just a game to get to see some of these guys, and I do think there were some positives coming out of individual performances. And overall, though, it was a loss. There was lack of offense, but this one felt a lot tighter than the 4-1 final score that you'll see on a stat sheet at the end of the night. We'll hear from Chris Kerber and Joe Vitale coming up in just a bit, but first, let's dive into our takeaways.
It's time for tonight's 3 takeaways, presented by Ted Cruz Frozen Custard, a St. Louis tradition for over 95 years. Unmatched quality, unforgettable taste.
And as always, we want your takeaways. You can send them over to us via our text line, 314-399-9646. You can also send them over into our YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL, as we have the conversation over there. Have a few people already in the discussion on that one, so a perfect place for you to bring your takeaways from the game tonight. First takeaway for me, some of these guys, this third line competition, I thought gave themselves another shot. We mentioned this with Joey in the extended pregame show, and a lot of these guys that are competing stood out to me, whether it was for better or for worse. But I'll hone in on the ones that I thought really stood out enough that I'd like to see more of it. One was Justin Carbonneau. I think it's self-explanatory. He picked up the point, took the shot, but you could tell that the Blues want to see more because they got him off of the line with Lucic and Bukestad. It was a line that really didn't have much offense. They tried to get him with a little bit more playmaking ability, which is no disrespect to those two players. They play a certain style. And Carbonneau is a guy that you try and get the puck to. So they moved him with Otto Stenberg and Nikita Alexandrov, and that's really where I think you saw the offense flow. He had one shot attempt in the first period and a half, and then when they broke up that line combination, Justin Carbonneau finished with a total of 3 shot attempts, 1 shot on goal, 1 that was blocked, and 1 that missed the net, and played the second most ice time right up there with Nikita Alexandrov. So I thought Carbonneau showcased it once again. His play away from the puck, I think, it has its moments when you look at it and you're like, you don't want to make that play. But it also has its moments where he's making drop passes or he's taking shots that you think he's getting it on net. So Carbonneau stood out to me. I thought Otto Stenberg was noticeable tonight. He had 5 shot attempts on top of a hit, on top of a takeaway, on top of 2 blocked shots. Played almost 2 minutes on the power play, played very little on the penalty kill. But Otto Stenberg, talking with Tim Taylor, is a guy that creates offense for others. And that's what you saw. The play that was the lone goal for the Blues tonight, that all began with Otto Stenberg. He was the one that took the puck in, was able to get it going, and then he went off for the line shift. And sometimes it's not so much what you do with the puck when they score, it's how good are you in terms of changing lines and recognizing when you have an opportunity to score and got fresh legs on the ice. And that's what Stenberg did. Saw the play, got off the ice, Lucic jumped on, and then Lucic, Alexandrov, and Carbonneau create that goal that was scored to make it 2-1 late in the second period. So, again, it's not anything that pops off the paper to you because he doesn't have 4 or many points. But Stenberg at the end of this one played over 16 minutes. I gave you the numbers, got power play time, got penalty kill time, was a impactful player, if you want to use that phrasing for it. So Stenberg was another one that stuck out to me. And then the one that I thought probably had the best game tonight was Matthew Joseph. And this is where the takeaway kind of gets to the conclusion. Matthew Joseph is one of those fringe players that's fighting for a roster spot, and I know he has the upper hand because he's the NHLer, but you've got some younger guys that are trying to compete for the spot, and you've got a guy like Milan Lucic, who we'll talk about in just a bit, trying to get that roster spot. So Joseph's kind of the guy that's trying to hold on to it. And Joseph was the most noticeable player on the ice, in my opinion. He and Justin Carbonneau, along with the goaltending. But Joseph tonight led the team in shots, led the team, or second in the team in hits. Tucker led the team in hits with 4 of them. Had a blocked shot and also had 1 takeaway. And, you know, Jim Montgomery referenced him Saturday. They had their scrimmage. And in the middle of a scrimmage in day 2 of training camp, or day 3 of training camp, Joseph threw his body down to block a shot. And everybody erupted on the bench. That's the type of competitiveness that Jim Montgomery is hoping to see. And Joseph had that again tonight. Created a couple of odd man rushes, played a lot of penalty kill time. He fit the role of what the Blues are looking for in one of those final roster spots to a T. Just like if you go through it in your head, you know that you're going to have Thomas and Buchnevich and Snuggerud and Holloway and Shen and Kyrou or Pius-Suter in the top 6. So whether it's Shen or Suter, that's a third-line player. Neighbors, who skated today, will be back with the team on Tuesday, and Bukestad. That's your top 9. And then you're talking about Toropchenko and Walker, pretty much a given that they're in the lineup. So I just listed 11 guys, and there's 1 roster spot left. And if you try and think of roles, Bukestad could be a 4th-line player or a 3rd-line player. So that means you're trying to find a spot for a 3rd-liner, which could be a Carbonneau, a Dvorsky, a Stenberg, a Texier, a Joseph, or you're looking for a 4th-line role, which could be a Sundqvist, could be a Joseph, could be a Lucic, an Alexandrov, a Kaskamaki. That's what they're fighting for. And I thought Joseph gave himself an upper leg on a lot of these guys for how he played tonight. Second takeaway from me, I really liked Adam Jiricek. Now, I know there were moments that Adam Jiricek pinched maybe too aggressively, and it led to an odd man rush. I think that's what happened on that Brennan Gaunt's goal, the one that made it 1-0. Jiricek pinched at the middle of the ice, gets past him, and then you got a 2-on-1 going the other way. Not what you want to see, but it's also a guy that played, 30-something games last season because of his injury. Joey and Curbs talked about it on the broadcast. He added 23 pounds of muscle. Here's what I really liked about Jiricek. He got shots on net. Luke Korak and I were texting about this. That is something that the Blues have just struggled to have from their defensemen for a long time. Defensemen who can get pucks on net. He had 2 shots that hit the net tonight, had 4 of them that were blocked, but generated some scoring opportunities with his aggressiveness in the offensive zone. There's some defensive nuances that he's going to learn as he continues to develop. I don't expect him to compete for a roster spot or even, frankly, see him at the NHL this season. But Doug Armstrong talked about this on Wednesday. You know, they're internally debating still, do they send him back to juniors or do they send him to the American Hockey League because he has a chance to go to the AHL whatever they decide to do will be interesting because that's just the development process for the defenseman. But the muscle, the ability to see offense, to aggressively chip, it's just fixing the defensive side of it. But, man, I really thought Jiricek was interesting in this one tonight. And then third takeaway from me, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back on the other side with a couple of your takeaways, and we'll also get to Chris Kerber and Joe Vitale's thoughts on this one. And I think I saw... Let me see if I can find this somewhere. Somebody messaged in and said, I'm already done with the Lucic experience. I saw it for, here it is right here. Richard on Twitter sent me this. I've seen enough of Lucic already. I'm over the experience. I don't know how I read the Lucic thing because there were moments when I saw Milan Lucic that I was like, ooh, yeah, you don't look like you're at the same pace as some of these guys. But then there were also moments where he used his body to the way that the Blues want him to. And here's the thing. If he makes this roster, and it's a big if, he's going to be that physical, forechecking, fourth line, post-whistle, scrum type of player. I don't know if I saw that in this game, but I don't know if I was expecting to see that in this game because it's first preseason. He's been away from the game for a while. It was more so pace. He played his role to a T, though, in terms of a big body. Like, he was in front of the net a lot. He got the assist on that goal, but there were two other plays that he was standing in front of the net when the shot came from the blue line. That's what his role's going to be. If he's a fourth-line player, if he's playing 12 minutes a night, he's going to be just going straight to the net. So, on that front, I think he looked fine. There were moments where, on the back check, he was the last one there. It didn't look as fast. That's to be expected. This was the first time back. I just don't know what it's going to look like. My guess is you're going to see more of this moving forward. But at least in the first look at Milan Lucic, he didn't look out of place. So I think that's a positive for him if you want him to make the team. But it's also, I guess, a negative against him if you're trying to set yourself above the rest in terms of Texier or Joseph or Carbonneau items like that. So and that was the other one. I didn't really notice a lot of Texier tonight. He had one shot attempt, which was a shot on goal. He did go 7 for 10 in the faceoff dot and played 3.5 minutes of power play time, but didn't really notice a whole lot. And if you're Texier, you're fighting to showcase that offense to potentially make the roster on that third-line winger role. But those are my takeaways in this one. As always, we want to hear yours, and we'll get to some of yours on the other side. But let's take a break. We'll come back, and we'll hear from Chris Kerber and Joe Vitale's final thoughts on the extended post-game coverage, the fourth period, here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN.
St. Louis. When the puck drops and your team hits the ice, you need a beer that plays just as hard. Zwickle Light from Urban Chestnut Brewing Company. Crisp, refreshing, and only 95 calories and 3.7 grams of carbs. Whether you're rinkside or couchside, when you're with Zwickle Light, you've got hometown flavor in your hand. Live your light style, St. Louis. Zwickle Light. Zwickle Light, the unofficial beer of St. Louis hockey.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
Nathan has taught me to embrace the moment. Age-wise, I'm in my late 60s. I'm old enough to be his grandfather. Will he be embarrassed to acknowledge me as his dad? I think the most important thing we can do is let them know that they're safe, that they're valued and cared for and loved, and that they're important.
I knew I wanted to be adopted by him because of how he taught me to be the person who I am today. And it's coming from a dad that didn't expect to become a dad. And I feel very proud to be his son.
I was what he needed, and he was what I needed. Every day is full of new opportunities. That's what it's been about, realizing the simple things that it takes to make such a huge difference in these kids' lives.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care at adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by Adopt U.S. Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. Welcome back to the First Community Credit Union Blues postgame show, presented by Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut on 101 ESPN.
Final time here on our extended postgame coverage, the fourth period, where you can join us over at our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Having a lot of people joining on the conversation, talking about Lucic, saying may need to just move off of him. I don't really know if we need to see anymore. You can't keep up with the pace. Whatever your opinion is your opinion. All I can tell you is that I truly believe the Blues would like to see him make this roster because he provides an element that they don't have a lot of. I don't think he looked so bad that it's like, oh, yeah, we're done with this. I didn't think that pace looked off. It just comes down to, does he fit the role of what the Blues are wanting? And I can't judge him off of one game because he hasn't played in almost 2 seasons. I think you're going to need a few more games. It would not surprise me to see him in the lineup next Saturday for another preseason. I was just going through this because last year at this time, after 2 preseason games, the Blues made 10 roster cuts to lower the group to try and get it to like one big group as they were going through training camp. I wonder if they do that. And I'm just going through some of the names, and there's guys that typically will just go back to juniors hockey so that they can isolate the group a little bit longer. We'll talk about that, maybe a couple of ideas on the other side. But for Lucic, and I think that's the hot button topic right now, especially over in our YouTube conversation, I think Lucic is going to be here towards the end. It's just a matter of how many games they decide to play him versus some of these other guys. Let's head back out to Columbus, get the final thoughts from Chris Kerber and Joe Vitale.
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Well, the Blues fall to the Columbus Blue Jackets by a score of 4-1. Much closer game all the way through than the final score would indicate. Blue Jackets made it 3-1 with 2.5 to go in the third. They added the empty netter with 23 seconds remaining. Otherwise, it was pretty much a close game all the way through. Not an overall clean game, Joe. Definitely another preseason game, as Carbonneau was the only player that played last night and in Dallas and then tonight in Columbus. But let's roll through some players. I'm going to give you some players' names, and you give me kind of a one-game scouting report for you. Let's start with the veteran 37-year-old we talked to before the game, Milan Lucic.
I thought Milan got better as the game went on. I thought he had a tough first period. You could tell he had to really shake off some rust. I think he was a step slow in the first 20 minutes. But, you know, I'm pushing for him. I think the coaches are pushing for him. I think the team wants to see him successful. They continue to put him in good spots. He played some time on the power play, spent some time with Carbonneau and Bukestad on the top line. And after that first period, I felt he just calmed down. I think everything just kind of got a little bit more mellow. I feel like he started to find his game. We started to see the forecheck. You know, he got an assist in that second period. I think that gave him some spirit as well. He played down the stretch till the end of the game there, Curbs. He was a great nut from presence. I really liked his composure with pucks in the offensive corner. So overall, Milan Lucic, he got better as the game went on. He's going to earn himself at least one more, if not 2. And so for him, the most important thing is he builds off where this game ended, and he continues to build into the very next game.
All right, it's Milan Lucic. What did you think of the young defenseman, Adam Jiricek?
I thought he was the best Blues player on the ice. I think this kid is a stud. I'm starting to see some really cool defensive attributes in him. You know, assistant GM Tim Taylor told us yesterday that he reminds you of a young Alex Pietrangelo, and you can see why. He's snarly in the D zone. He's great as far as picking pucks off the wall. He can be a one-man breakout at times. He gets up the ice. He closes the gap in the neutral zone, and he can dance at the blue line in the offensive zone. We saw him multiple times kind of channel his inner Cale Makar, if you will, to get around and shake some wingers to get some shots through. He ran a power play. He was noticeable all over the ice. A lot of little stick checks, a lot of little kill plays, getting involved in the offense. Remember, on the only goal here tonight for St. Louis with Alexandrov, it was the Jiricek pinch on the strong side. Kind of surprised the winger, kind of came out of nowhere, almost Houdiniing him a little bit to kind of keep that puck alive, which ended up in the back of the Columbus Blue Jackets net that got the Blues on the board, that certainly got the Blues a lot of momentum as that game started to turn. So overall, best player on the ice. Cannot wait to see him. You called it during the game. Cannot wait to see him with a more of a veteran presence at some point throughout this camp with a Cam Fowler or possibly a Philip Broberg.
All right, let's go back to the veteran side of things. Matthew Joseph.
He needed to have a good night, and I think he had an exceptional night. I think he got to what his game is. He's a shooting forward, a forechecking forward. He's the guy that's going to lead the rush. But everything about his game, the foundation starts and ends with his speed, moving his feet. He looked confident. He looked like he had some jump. He looked like he had some rocket fuel in him at some point. He drew a couple penalties here, or at least the one penalty there in that first half of that second period that really set the Blues up for their first power play. So overall, I think he made a difference in the game. He had some really nice opportunities. I liked him with Texier. I liked the speed. I liked the assertiveness out of the veteran. And overall, I think Matthew Joseph has had a bit of an up-and-down experience here in St. Louis. He was in and out a little bit more than he wanted to last year. This is a big camp for him. He's a veteran player that I think a lot of these young guys are looking to hopefully push out. But he made a stance here in his first game saying that I want to be here and I'm going to bring the gifts that I have to the game, and he made a difference in the game as well.
All right, what'd you think of Otto Stenberg, who last season came over to North America eventually and played 38 games in Springfield, picked up 17 points, and the 25th overall pick from 2023 that the Blues acquired in the Achari-O'Reilly combination to Toronto?
I think he was good. I think he was young. I think that, to me, it's a typical young player, in a preseason game. The scouting report on him is he complements other players. You see why. He thinks the game very well. You put him around a Carbonneau, you put him around a Robert Thomas, who he was a part of, and around in that second day of the preseason camp there at Centene. You can see where good players around him, he really comes to another level. Now, for him, the challenge is going to be, you're not going to have a chance to really be around a lot of Robert Thomases and Jordan Kyrous right off the hop. So how do you maximize your time with those kind of third and fourth lines with limited minutes? And I think that that's going to be a challenge for any young player, and certainly for him. So overall, I thought he was okay. I thought he did some really good things. I thought he showcased some flash. That little play that I believe was Matthew Joseph made to him where he kind of did the backhand forehand tuck in that third period. You see the talent. You see the skill level. All that is there. Now it's about the young man continuing to get seasoned. Maybe, again, in Springfield, you go down, you continue to build your game down there. You get more and more confident playing all situations because there's a lot of growth ahead for him. So overall, very pleased with not only in this game, but I really loved him with Robert Thomas there at training camp there at Centene. So the better players you put him around, he's going to continue to raise his game to the next level. It's all about how does he keep getting more opportunities to put himself in that position.
Justin Carbonneau, the only player that played in Dallas in Game 1, played tonight in Columbus in Game 2. He had some different line mates as the game went along.
It was a different version of him, no question about it, right? Last night, in Dallas, he's playing with Dylan Holloway and Dalibor Dvorsky. That was the most dynamic line on the ice for St. Louis last night. They made things happen, especially in that first period. You see the give and the goes. You see the anticipation. You see how they create things for players around them, how they jump to open spaces, how they find different lanes. So tonight's game now for Carbonneau was a different sample size of what they can bring out of him. I think for Doug Armstrong and Jim Montgomery, they looked at the lineup here, and I think they purposely wanted to put him with players that are going to be fulfilling bottom six roles potentially on this team, with a Nick Bukestad in the middle of a Milan Lucic. We've seen that he can play around skilled players. We know that that's there. Clearly that was evident last night. He was one of the best Blues players on the ice. But how about tonight? What is he going to do? How is he going to bring out the best in his minutes when you're around forechecking, heavy, kind of that sandpaper style of hockey, maybe a little bit less skill, a little bit less vision, a little bit less hockey smarts, but certainly the work ethic of those two big bodies he was around here. I think it took him a little bit while to get into the game. I think a couple line adjustments, certainly for Jim Montgomery, you put him with some skilled players, Alexandrov, and his game started to blossom. So I think he's an incredible player, an incredible talent. I love his attitude on and off the ice. It is very clear and evident right now that he brings out his best when he is around skilled forwards, and I think that's what we saw in the second half of that game.
Second game in a row, and this is becoming quite a pleasant theme. Goaltending was good.
It was very good. Again, don't be mesmerized or don't be fooled by the 4-1 score. I think that outside of that one, I know he would have loved to have had there in that third period to keep it a one-goal game with about 3 minutes to go. I thought Zarenko played really well. Joel Hofer was exceptional. Loved the way he played the puck. You're starting to see the confidence that he's starting to absorb, learning from underneath Binnington as far as coming out in the offensive zone with the opponent and coming out playing pucks, moving them. He was sharp. The rebound goal, not much you can do about that. And the other goal that he allowed was, I know it's one he's going to want because he saw it, and he'll be losing a little bit of sleep over it. The 5-hole one that opened the scoring here as the penalty box member from the Columbus Blue Jackets snuck it by him. But outside of that, through 6 periods of hockey. One thing is very clear here in St. Louis right now, Curbs, and it is just that. The goaltending is very solid. I thought it was just the Binnington-Hofer show, and I wasn't quite sure exactly what we had in the minors, even though you heard some really good whispers of Colton Ellis and, of course, the Cranleys. But Colton Ellis was the AHL MVP for that team last year. You saw him in last night's game, the way he really shined and pushed that game into overtime. There is one clear vision here for St. Louis, and that, to me, is that goaltending is not going to be a problem here for a little while.
All right, what do you got for your Bud Light 3 stars of the game? And your work boots. Yeah,
work boots tonight. I am going to go with Bitton. I love the fight. I love the way he was on top of it right there. I'm going to go with, let's see here. For the St. Louis Blues, I am going to go with Juracek at number 3. I am going to go with Stenberg at number 2. And who scored the game winner here for Columbus? I have to go back. Was it?
That would be actually Del Bell Blues, who had the second goal of the game.
The Blues. It'll be him. We'll give him the number 1 star here. And then I'm going to go Blues the rest of the way here in this preseason because I just want to. And they're my 3 stars in work boots.
Because I
shouldn't
can't.
really need to say anything
because
else.
I don't really. All right. That works. So who'd you go to the second, though?
I think I went there. Goes Juracek.
No, you and Juracek 3rd.
3.
And
let's go Juracek 2, Stenberg 3.
Stenberg. Okay. I don't think it's really going to matter in my scorebook here, but okay, I'll just put a bunch of arrows. All right, so the Blues fall to the Blue Jackets there by a score of 4-1, Alex, and we'll get back at it next Saturday night, a home game. Tickets available at stlouisblues.com. On ice against the Chicago Blackhawks, it'll be preseason game number 3 of 6 preseason games for the St. Louis Blues. Hope everybody has a great start to your weekend. Let's get it back to you in our network studios.
All right, guys, have a safe trip home, and we'll see you around the rink this week and Saturday for the Blues and Blue Jackets. We're actually going to hear from Jim Montgomery in just a bit. We got some audio from Columbus, so we'll get the head coach's thoughts on the game tonight. But I was just kind of going through this, and I was talking through with Jordan Deacon and Grant Francis. You know, again, we talked about this with Joe in terms of fighting for those roster spots, the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th forward. In that group for those 3 roster spots, I think you can argue a Carbonneau, a Dvorsky, Stenberg, Lucic, Joseph Alexandrov, Texier, Sundqvist, and Kaskamaki. Out of those, 9 names, about 3 of them have stood out to me in the first 3 preseason games. And look, it's the first preseason game for all of them, so it's hard to decipher from. But you assume Oskar Sundqvist is going to be one of those 3 forwards that make the roster. And I think after tonight, Joseph put himself in that conversation. And then the last one's really going to come down to Milan Lucic, because the other ones, it's, do you decide to keep Carbonneau? Is he going to play? Or do you go through the AHL? And again, all of this is relying on how many more how good they look in the next few preseason games. But you've got all of those guys fighting for 3 roster spots, essentially 2 when you assume Oskar Sundqvist is a part of this roster. So it makes those last 4 preseason and really the last 2 preseason games that much more intriguing when you talk about potentially those guys getting another shot in the lineup. Let's hear from Jim Montgomery before we close it down here after the team's 4-1 loss to Columbus.
Lots of young players getting opportunities tonight and this weekend. Did anyone stand out in this game too?
I did like the young goalie, Vadim. I thought he played well. There's a couple of defensemen, Skinner in particular, that stood up, made some plays. And then, up front, there was flashes from a lot of good young players, and then Carbonneau, Stenberg, Peterson.
And then wrapping up kind of the first week of preseason games, overall impressions with where the team is at?
You try. It's hard to judge because you are given a lot of players that haven't played within our structure. I'm not seeing a lot of our structure right now. I don't think we're playing really fast. But again, there's a lot of guys, and we're throwing a lot of information at people, so we probably slow them down as coaches.
First game for Lucic in the Blue Note tonight. What do you think of him?
I thought he continued to get better throughout the game. He had that assist in the second period. He almost scored right after that, and got our team some momentum.
And then same thing with Bugstad, first game for the Blues. Thoughts?
Yeah, a big forward. You can tell why he's played in the league for such a long time. Does a lot of little things right.
And then good to see Tucker healthy again. He got a lot of minutes tonight. How do you think he looked?
I thought Tucker was average. Like he did some things well. There's some things that we know he does a lot better. That again, it's been a long time and it's his first game, since he's healthy again. So I'm not going to put too much into his game because we know what he has and we know what's in him.
I think a lot of people might react like we reacted. I was like, wow. But first of all, I love the honesty from Jim Montgomery. He is blunt about it. But second, you expect some of these guys to be average in their first preseason game, especially when you're a guy who had an injury and missed as much as he did from the postseason throughout the offseason. But, the one that stuck out to me was his comments on Lucic. He's right. Like, it may not have been noticeable to a lot of people, but he improved as that game went along, which is what you would want. And Jim Montgomery said he was a tone setter out there once he picked up that assist and nearly scored another goal. So a lot of this is all just riding on what does it look like the next time they're in the lineup in preseason, which will be on Saturday against the Blackhawks. A 6 o'clock puck drop from Enterprise Center, which means the pregame skate starts at 5 o'clock right here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. A huge shout out to Grant Francis, who's done a great job as always. Jordan Deacon helping out as well. Curbs and Joey. I'm Alex Ferrario. Hope everyone has a great rest of their night. We will talk to you on Saturday. I will talk to you tomorrow for BK and Ferrario starting at 11 a.m. And we are also going to be joining Sunday Night Football in action right now. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks for listening to the First Community Credit Union Blues pregame show, presented by Scott Lee Heating Company and Urban Chestnut on 101 ESPN.
Winter is coming fast, and just like a great hockey team, your home needs a solid defense. At Scott Lee Heating Company, we